Hello, welcome back for another video of China-Africa debates with C.Geraud Neema, and I'm back today for another video where we are going to talk about China-Africa engagement. And today the topic of our discussion is related to China-Africa trade in 2023. For those who don't know yet, my name is C.Geraud Neema. I'm the Africa editor of the China Global South Project, an independent online media that covers China engagement in the Global South. So we make videos, we make different content, and we also make videos. Among those videos, we have this segment, the China-Africa debate. In this segment, I talk about a topic of news that we've covered during the week or something that's quite interesting about China-Africa that's happened over the week or at any point in time. So today we are going to talk about China-Africa trade numbers that came out early this year in January. So we got the numbers from the China General Custom website where they publish regularly every month and every year the general trade numbers of the import, export with different parts of the world. They also have data when it comes to the trade numbers with Africa. Africa as a continent and specific countries in Africa. So we have some very interesting things to learn about the China-Africa trade this year. I think we're gonna be learning new stuff, and it's gonna give us some vision and idea about what's happened in China-Africa space during this year when it came to financing, when it comes to trade. So what do we know about China-Africa trade in 2023? I'm just pulling up the numbers here, so I'm gonna get the numbers right. So in 2023, the China-Africa numbers in terms of trade was overall numbers were 282,093,241 billion US dollar in total. In terms of export, China export to Africa, it was 172,81,529 billion US dollars. And in terms of import, it was $109 billion, which means that China exported more than imported from Africa. It means that in terms of trade balance, Africa has a deficit, a negative trade balance toward China, which has been a topic of complaint of many African countries over the years. What we also learn about those numbers, like China imports from Africa decreased from 117 billion last year to 109 billion this year. It means that China imported 8 billion less than imported in 2022, but its export to Africa quite increases interestingly from 164 billion to 172 billion in 2023. We also learned that the overall deficit quite increased. We went from 49 billion in 2022 to 64 billion in 2023, which tells you a lot about the imbalance of China-Africa trade over the years. And as I was saying it earlier, many African countries have been complaining about that situation, and they've been wanting it to change. In the last FOCAC in 2021 in Senegal and Dakar, they've been asking China to take measures to allow African products to have access to Chinese market. But so far, China has taken some initiative allowing at least 16 countries in Africa to export the product to China with zero tariff on it. We're gonna look into that situation, but those measures did not really change a lot about China Africa trade numbers in 2023. So what do we learn? What do we know about China-Africa trade in 2023? Just like in 2022, China, the top 5 China-Africa trade partners are South Africa, Angola, DRC, Egypt, and Ghana. Those top 5 countries in total, they represent roughly 44% of all the trade that China has done in Africa. So out of the 5 countries, out of the top 5 countries, the top 3, South Africa, Angola, and DRC are the only 3 countries in Africa that enjoy a positive trade balance with China. It means that in those 3 countries, China imports more from those countries than it exports in those countries, which should be a positive aspect from a trade balance perspective. But when you look closely on what they do export to China, you realize that it's not really something, it's something to be happy about, but it's really not something to be happy about. In the case of the DRC, for instance, in 2023, DRC exported mainly only natural resources, being copper and cobalt. Copper and cobalt were on top there. And you also had different minerals products, coltan, cassiterite, and everything, but mainly natural resources. Same with Angola. Crude oil. Crude oil was the top one exported product from Angola to China in 2023. South Africa, I'd say, is the biggest winner, and this is one of the lessons we're going to learn in those trade numbers in 2023. It was the same in 2022 because of its economic development level, because of the breadth of the industrial landscape, because of how rich it is. South Africa is really enjoying a very healthy trade relationship with China. First, it has a positive trade balance with China, not a deficit like many African countries. And second, it is when you look at what South Africa has exported and imported from China, you will notice that you have a lot of different products. You have raw materials, of course, natural resources, of course, but you also have a lot of manufactured product. So you have a lot of type of product that South Africa has exported and imported from China. And at the end, it does, enjoy a very positive trade balance. That tells you a lot of what the biggest winner of China-Africa trade in 2023. It also tells you that African country needs to do a lot, much more to be able to win in the trade relationship with China. Because when you look at the numbers, beyond the numbers, when you look at the description of different products they are exporting to China, raw materials are on the top of the list. In almost every country, they are on the top of the list. They are, either it's a mining product, either it's agricultural product. In the case of Ghana, for instance, you have a lot of cocoa product, either it's in terms of like timber and those kind of natural resources. Manufactured product, not much. The only country, as I say, was really exporting those manufactured products, it's South Africa. Another lesson to learn in those trade numbers in 2023 is the fact that Chinese policy, the policy they've put in place in November 2022 to allow 10 African countries in 2022 and 6 African countries in 2023 to be able to export their product in China free of taxes, free of charges when they export it to China, has borne no fruits. Because when you look at the numbers of countries like Guinea-Bissau, Gambia, Uganda, and Malawi, the countries that have been in that list in 2022, when you look at the profile of the trade relationship with China, you will notice that they did not export much to China. They did not. They didn't have anything like, something really big to export from China. Just to allow me to check some interesting data here so you kind of understand, because I'm reading out here, because I want you to get an idea of what I'm talking about. Here, for instance, I'm looking at the numbers of the profile of a country. Let me pick a country a country like Lesotho in 2023. So in 2023, the most that Lesotho has exported to China was automatic circuit breaker for voltage not exceeding 1000 volts. Those products, it was only like 25,000 number of items in terms of items. But in terms of most of them were also coming from South Africa. They bought it from South Africa, they shipped it to China. And the second product they exported was like, let's say 79 tons of product was greasy shorn wool, not carded or combed. You see, natural resources coming from an animal, natural resources. Let me take another number so you can get an idea of how those measures do not really bear any fruits. Uganda. Uganda has been complaining about the situation. You remember, if for those who've been following us last month in January, Chinese Vice Prime Minister Liu Guozhong was visiting Africa. He was also in Uganda, and when he met Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni complained. He complained about the fact that China's market is not open to African product, and he's been pleading that China should take a lot of measures, should do much more to allow African product to enter the Chinese market. And so Uganda was also among the countries that benefited from China's policy to export to export 98% of their product free of charges to China in terms of tariff and export and everything. So when you look at now the numbers in 2023 of what Uganda exported to China, let me go through the numbers. What Uganda exported much. The highest product that Uganda exported to China was sheets for plywood of other tropical wood. And also you had coffee not roasted or decaffeinated. You also had other tropical wood, swan lengthwise and thick. You also had what? Other veneer sheets of other tropical woods. So you see a lot of natural resources product. You have quartz, you have what you have let me look again I'm gonna put the link below so you can find those data, so you can be able to download them and find for yourself what you can learn and what it can tell you, about China Africa trade. So you have those kind of circumstances where you have those African countries benefiting from Chinese policy, but since they don't have a robust and strong manufacturing landscape and industry back home, they don't produce manufactured products, so they don't even have access to Chinese markets to export to. So people have been saying that, China, maybe we can win by exporting agricultural product to China. Many African countries have been now exporting agricultural product to China. We have the case of Kenya since 2022. Kenya now can export fresh avocado from Kenya to China. You have South Africa that's also following suit. You also have and Tanzania was trying to do the same. And you have a number of different African countries that are trying to export fresh fruits to China. This can be a good idea, but the reality is much more complex because Africa is importing a lot of its food from different parts of the world. So when we're gonna be able to produce that much of agricultural product, I think it's gonna be much more useful to use them for us in terms of feeding ourselves to become self-sustainable than exporting it to China. So the question is agriculture be able really to help us fill the gap in our trade between Africa and China? I don't think that's going to be the way forward in that direction. So that tells you a lot about China Africa trade. So what else we can learn about the China Africa trade? I think I've covered most of the points. Imbalance towards China, the supremacy of natural resources in terms of export. South Africa being the main winner in that in China Africa trade, and of course Chinese measure that it took in 2022 did not bear any fruit for Africa in terms of accessing Chinese market. One last thing I'd like to add is that in 2021, during the FOCAC they had in Senegal, Chinese President Xi Jinping had made the pledge that in the next 3 years, meaning 2021 up to 2024, China is going to increase its imports from Africa to reach $300 billion. Today, we are February 2024. We're going to have the FOCAC likely at the end of the year. It's likely also going to happen in Beijing. We still don't know if it's going to be at the ministerial level, or it's going to be at presidential level. But in that FOCAC meeting, it's likely that Africa is going to talk about the trade numbers. They're also talking about the import numbers, because what the numbers are telling us for 2024 In 2024, China imported only 109 billions of good from Africa, and most of them were natural resources. So we are way far from the 300 billion that China wanted to import from Africa in the last 3 years. Unless a miracle happened, unless between now and November or October or December, when the FOCAC might happen, unless something really huge happens, but I don't see how that number is going to change drastically from 109 billion to 300 billion in 2024. So it tells you that there is a lot that needs to be done in general, and Africa needs to improve a lot in its China-Africa in its trade with China. China also needs to make a lot of efforts, but somehow I kind of wonder what kind of effort they can do if, especially, we don't have those measures, if we don't have the prerequisite in terms of a strong economic backbone or a strong economic industrial landscape to allow us to manufacture products so we can ship them to China, to China and else any part of the world. So that's the reality of China-Africa trade in 2023. One last thing before I forget. So 282 billion 93 41 billion US dollar. That was the number. So when you compare it with China's trade in the rest of the world, we are ahead of Australia, India, Russia, and Taiwan. And mind you, I'm comparing Africa to the trade that China is doing with some countries. We are ahead of them. But when we put them on the scale of continental level, Asia, Africa, Latin America, other parts of the world, Africa is the very last one. It's the bottom, because China is not doing much of a trade, a lot of its trades with Africa. When I look at the number here, which country is on the top? Which region is on the top? We have APEC region, so it means Southeast Asia, and Asia and Pacific region on top. We also have North America is well positioned. And yes, we have really, yes, of course, North America is well positioned. We have Asia well positioned. We have Europe. We have the United States. So we have a lot to catch on, and it's gonna be our responsibility as African country to improve and to take measures to try to improve our economic situation, our economic landscape, and our economic background to be able to win in this China-Africa trade. As I said earlier, so far, South Africa is the only country that's really winning that trade relationship with China, because they have a strong economic and industrial landscape that allows them to manufacture product and to export both finished product, both manufactured product and natural resources, and at the end, enjoy a positive trade balance with China. So that was all for today for this China-Africa debate. I'm going to come back hopefully next week with another video covering China-Africa debate and what's happening in China-Africa space. As I was saying earlier, we have those videos quite often every week where I do cover different topic related to China-Africa engagement. If it's your first time on this channel, click the subscribe button and click the bell so you can be notified every time we do post a new video that covers China in Africa debate. So if you have any question, comment, and you want to get in touch with us, don't hesitate to contact us in my email address that's going to appear down in the video. We're going to put links of the resources that we've used about those numbers, the China custom. We're going to put them on the show notes. We're going to put different stories that we've covered around those trade numbers, both in French, in Projet Afrique Chine, and also in China Global South. We're going to put them on the show notes so you can have access to those data, to download them, and to know really what's happening in China-Africa trade. So that was all for me for today, and see you next week for another video of China-Africa debate. Bye-bye.